Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. Like Julia said, we understand the timing on this is difficult. So we're honored by the presence and your energy and your desire to be here, and we'll do our best to try and deliver something for you. I'm the founder of Green Bear Group. We are what we like to call the OG marketing environmental space company. It started in 2009, and as far as I can tell, we are the singular, still running company focused exclusively in environmental space and climate change. Couple of things that we're really proud of is we created this campaign called Sustainable Saturdays for the Seattle Mariners, if anyone's a baseball fan. And it was the first in the United States fan engagement campaign focused on sustainability. And it ran for 3 years. And the results were off the charts. And it was kind of cool for us because we got to do something that no one else had done yet, which you're going to see that in spades when we talk about the specifics of what's going on here that no one else has done. The other most fun thing that we did is we get to play with the Obama White House in creating National Green Sports Day back before the other organization and administration came in and put the kibosh on that. But that's way more than enough. My role here is just to help these guys tell you a little bit about themselves. But before we do that, I just want to kill the lights and show you something for your consideration.
Holidays are coming, holidays are coming, holidays are coming, holidays are coming. 'Tis the season, watch out, look around, something's coming, coming to town. Something magical in the night, can you see it shining bright? Always Coca-Cola, holidays refreshments, what we bring. 'Tis the season, it's always a real thing.
Holidays are coming. Oh, have you seen it yet?
Holidays are coming, 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 holidays are coming.
So before we get into it, I want you to keep in mind AI's impact on today's discussion is not what you think, okay? Before we go to that, I just want to have a sense of what did anybody see in that ad spot that jumped out to them? Yes.
I just like it made me think of very different. Going way back to like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Rankin Bass and the claymation. Those squirrels almost look like call back to that scene with Pearl Ives and other little animals playing. Y'all have seen it, but I mean that was just stop motion. Like move them with a 28 frames a second or something like that. This is a whole little world, but it still had that same warm fuzzy effect, at least for me watching it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so keep that in mind. Geography. Typically, we tend to think of the idyllic American Christmas, probably in New England. It's snowing. Maybe there's a little snow on the ground, but it's flurrying on Christmas, and you see all of those scenes. And it's just kind of the image that we have, the stereotype that is built into us. So I just want to leave. Yes.
The timing of the ad, right, came around about November-ish, right? Yeah. So the seasonality is very important. That you can't obviously go and put that out there now.
Right. Right. And think about the planning that has to go in if you wanted to launch. Any of you who have any background at all in marketing or production, if you want something to launch in November 4th, think about how far ahead and what you have to do to pull that together. All right. So I just wanted to set the table, and we'll see a little bit of twists coming up. So I'd like to introduce Siara and Johnny, and actually, I can't do them justice, so I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves. So Siara, do you want to start, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. And I'm Siara. I'm founder of Innoviate and also a product innovation advisor to Silverside AI. And we basically have created Morpheus, which is a powerful AI-powered decisioning engine that is used currently with all of our beta customers, not only with CMOs and marketing organizations for better return on investment, strategic positioning, but also CFOs and CEOs are using it to really understand where to allocate funds, and really sort of disrupts that top part of the funnel, which I'll talk about later.
Awesome. And I'm Johnny Rohrbach. I'm one of the co-founders of Silverside AI. We made that at. So it is always a little interesting watching that back, because that came out on November 4th of last year, and it's essentially the VHS tape of AI now. Like, it's fully out of date. And so by January 1st of this year, we progressed about 10 years in terms of AI video capabilities. So there's a lot of stuff that will come out now. You'll see. It's a little different, but we worked really closely with Coke, along with other clients like Sephora, Levi's, to build underlying technologies largely based on workflows, so that you can do things like that at scale and with speed that we previously didn't have access to. So I always love to have CFOs in the room, because you guys are typically the ones who are actually the easiest to sell to, because the bottom line is a very clear metric on things like that. So it's time to talk a little bit more about it.
All right, great. Thank you. So Coke, everybody knows Coke, right? Founded in 1886, I think. One of the interesting things about that is you all are familiar with the concept of first mover advantage, first into the market. And that's still played. I mean, that plays today from historically 13 years later is when Pepsi was formed, and never has caught up. Well, if you think about that in terms of the use of technology like AI and being willing to risk first in the market with something new today, that's a great thing. And especially with a brand like Coke. Not only did they have that, but I don't know if anyone realizes the top 5 brands in the world by volume of annual revenue and net worth are all tech brands. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, 1 through 5. You know who number 6 is? Coke. Okay. Largest retail consumer brand in the world. So if they're experimenting and diving in and trying to do this, think of how important it's going to be to all the other companies who really don't want to be the first, because it's like, oh, this is scary. Well, when someone like Coke jumps in, then everyone else is going to follow. So that's why it's important to think about what's going on here and to work with folks like Siara and Johnny. So let's start off with you, Siara. First question. You mentioned the benefits to marketing. You talked specifically about disruption at the top of the funnel. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So if we take a look at everything that's happening within organizations, especially within marketing, from production of creative all the way to investment in digital marketing, et cetera, most of the MarTech stack has sort of grown in breadth and depth. And it's grown something like 1,530% in the last 5 years. We have like 15,000 companies. Most all of those companies offer point solutions at that bottom of the funnel, really trying to accelerate conversions, really getting people to test more. But nobody is really looking at what I want to say is the dark funnel, the dark part of the funnel, where, not in a bad term, but in an opportunistic term. And that is really around strategy building, creative workflows, production. And this is where I think AI really excels, is really taking timelines and shortening them so teams have more time to go back and actually workshop versus creating. What's happening today, at least pre-AI, is that all the way up and down the funnel, you spend so much time locating leads, investing, analytics, and creating that you don't really have any time to think. And what I've really believed is there are 2 sides to that top of the funnel. One is really strategy, positioning, understanding, insights, and then the creative part of it, which all then waterfall down to create accelerated conversion rates. One of the things I'm sure everybody have noticed, including folks outside of marketing, is that while companies have increased in breadth and the number of companies that offer point solutions at the bottom of the funnel, we don't see that increase in conversion. There is no company out there that has gone from let's say 4% conversion rate to 20% conversion rate because of all those solutions. So more complex data, more complexities around workflows, and less staff and less budget. So, this is where AI can really come in on the strategy, positioning, insights, as well as the creative part to create production workflows that help you capture that cost to get into market fast. And that's what happens. You're so stuck in the workflows, you can't get into market till it's like too late and you've missed the boat on all this opportunity.
So let me ask you for, say, a specific example of where the strategic implementation comes from. Like, what are the insights? What are some of the data? Can you give us an example of, with or without company names, what exactly would they be able to do faster and more that frees them up to do better creative or more customized outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the customers that is currently in our beta, they're in the energy drink sector. So they really had a very opportunistic time where 2 weeks in April, they have seasonally always seen an increase in sales. The 2 weeks in April, they've always seen this really good peak in the quarter of sales.
Energy drinks?
Yes.
Trying to figure out what April was.
Spring break.
Yeah, exactly.
Spring break, marathons,
Exactly.
Yes. So what they really wanted to do is they wanted to be able to understand diminishing returns within Google and Facebook. Now, if you take the extra spend that you have and you take your analytics team, it's very normal for your analytics team to be drowning in data for the next 3 weeks, trying to figure out where to invest, what to do, where have we reached diminishing returns, where has the market shifted. So Morpheus, our platform, is able to just put in the objective, and we're able to get the output of where you invest the dollars, which ad campaigns, at what time, and at what cost to acquire a customer do you change your creative. And so it's extremely powerful because those two functions are normally very separate. The investment function lives separately than the A/B testing function,
Right.
and they never talk. And this actually merges all of that into one output that you get in less than 60 seconds. And so the company was successfully able to implement that and got about 15% extra revenue
Nice.
from just that media mix modeling conversion.
It's kind of interesting too that there's a technology and a platform that is now helping eliminate silos in human interaction in
Yes.
companies.
Yeah. And the silo, I mean, yes, there's silos outside of marketing, right? We all know that, but there's actually a tremendous amount of silos within marketing. One of the biggest silos is the silos of data, right? Facebook data is never like meshing with Google data. And then that data never meshes with Salesforce data. And the importance to have something overarching that pulls from all those data sources and is able to not only inform strategy, but inform creative and production flows is tremendous.
I love that. I love because I don't know about you guys, but for me, intuitively, or maybe because I'm a little older than some of the founders out here, I think technology, and I don't see it as enhancing human interaction, right? I look at things, say, okay, texting, it's great. I use it now. I hated it at the beginning, but it's so functional, except when you have to have a conversation that involves some difference of opinion or persuasion or something that's other than just giving data, then the technology in that specific instance falls down, right? Because you don't have emotion, you don't have
Reasoning.
and you don't know the body language or intonation. Whereas this AI is helping do the opposite.
Exactly.
That's kind of cool. Okay, Johnny, before we head to you, I want to now put on these other two ads. So I want you to pay attention here again, and then kind of start talking about the impact of what it enabled you to do. So can we kill the lights again, please?
Something magic in the night. Can you see it shining bright? Always Coca-Cola.
Okay, so that's just a refresher. That's a 30 of the same kind as 60. Don't turn the lights up yet. Now I want you to watch this one and pay close attention to what's different between this one and the last one.
Something magic in the night. Can you see it shining bright? Always Coca-Cola. Holidays are coming. Holidays are coming. Holidays are coming. Holidays are coming. Holidays are coming.
So hold your questions and your opinions for a second. I'd like to toss it over to Johnny and talk about what in there was a little harbinger of some of the important impact that AI and company were able to make for Coke.
Yeah, well, I think if you think about this entire process, it's a fairly significant departure from the traditional marketing process where you have an agency come and pitch you 10 ideas, you slowly hone in, you get a script, then you storyboard, then you do a big shoot day or you do big animations, and then you're walked. That's the content that you have to work with. And then you create your 30s, your 60s, your 15s, whatever it is from that, which is a profoundly drawn out process, intensely expensive and time consuming, and requires really large teams. And so despite the fact that that is kind of a vestige of where we were 6 months ago, it represented a much bigger change in the marketing ecosystem in a really obvious way, which is just the ability to talk to demographics that weren't historically spoken to when you had this really broad messaging, which ultimately led to fairly outsized returns on that campaign. But it also kind of ushered in a new way of working in marketing, where instead of all of those protracted different segments and silos, as we've talked about, it really allowed a much more cohesive and iterative process. So within about 2 days after getting the brief from Coca-Cola, we had made a V1 of the entire app. That included training LoRa models, which are small-scale image models, on the trucks and specific things, creating workflows that could actually generate the scenery with some level of cohesion. And obviously, there's still some things wanting in that one for sure, but just that ability to create cohesive lighting environments, and then the ability to kind of do a lot of what has traditionally been post-production and pre-production. So actually training models on logos and the bottle to reproduce those and create them. And then lastly, this was an 8-week process. So they came to us and they gave us 20% of a traditional marketing budget for their holiday campaign. They gave us 8 weeks from start to the time it actually trafficked globally. And then 5 days before we were supposed to ship, they came to us and they said, we'd like to localize this to well over 100 different markets, because we feel as if it's not speaking to everyone outside of like the historic Northeast snowy Christmas environment. They felt this would pay dividends. And for those of us who were working on it, it was a super fun surprise that we had 4 days to pull that off.
Wait a minute. Is that an honest super fun surprise or an ironic super fun?
I don't think my blood pressure has ever been higher. It was a profoundly stressful moment when they called us, and ultimately what had happened is their CMO had saw it, their global CMO had saw the just traditional spot and said like, okay, wow, well, we want a Coke Zero version. We want a Diet Coke version. We want to localize it to all these different markets because we know that, for example, someone in Miami is having a very different holiday experience than someone in New York. And so how do we speak to those consumer segments on a deeper level? So ultimately, we're able to create a workflow that allowed us to create those end cards at scale using actual city skylines, which, thank goodness, in retrospect, are not IP. They're IP free. They're free, right? But ultimately, we're able to create 150-ish different versions of that ad. And the really cool thing is that you look at that and you go, yeah, it's a cool ad, whatever. But the ability to localize it and do it at such speed and scale transitioned to 80% cost savings, 90% faster time to market, and ultimately is their third highest performing holiday ad ever. And that's largely attributed to the ability to localize.
So I don't want to lose sight of some of the stuff you said at the beginning.
Sure.
I came from a production and creative video production and film background. So when you were starting to talk about Well, you've got, your brief, and then you get the outline, and then your script, and then, you set up your shoot, hire everybody, cast your actors, etc.
Sure.
That was typically, if we were in a rush, we could get most of that done in a month before shooting.
Sure.
Right. And then multiple iterations. My favorite day, shoot days, because I directed, but not exactly the most efficient use of time and money.
Yeah.
So it's what I heard you say, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear on it, is that you're taking all of these steps all the way through production and post-production.
Yeah.
And you're automating that by teaching the system, having the system gather in all the data so that the models of the trucks, that the scenery, all of that becomes not something that I have to go out and think about. And it gives me the opportunity to look at it, like you said, 2 days after you. So that's like, hey, Mr. Customer, here's your rough cut. I don't know if you're used to hearing that term, but that would typically be, after several weeks. And so not only does it save money, but it gives you more creative options.
100%.
Right? Because they like it, they don't like it. 2 days later, you get a different version.
Right.
And then you had talked about, Siara, the idea of the marketing side and the research versus the A/B testing folks, and how, they didn't necessarily talk to each other. Well, now you could do A through Z testing if you wanted to. And so tell us a little bit about, you said the cost was 20% of what you guys, and you did 100 plus versions.
Yeah. That's just actual versions of a 30-second, not mentioning cut downs, social versioning.
Okay. All right. Talk to us a little before we go on to the next thing, which I don't know about you guys, but one of the things that hit my mind first when you're talking about we can do this, 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 and this, and all, the first thing I'm thinking of is jobs. Okay. All of my producers, all of my PAs, even my job, where are they going to be? So we'll talk about that in a second. But the thing I want to understand is not lose sight of is the personalization.
Yeah.
The ability to target the different audiences. The end card, which is the part where it shows, Miami and their skyline and such. That could be a much bigger portion of it too, if they wanted.
Yeah.
So if they didn't need their brand presence to be the first 27 seconds out of a 30, you could have given them even more Miami. If you wanted to, and not have any snow beforehand. Right. So the options, they just kind of blow me away because I didn't even know about this until we were having this conversation.
Yeah.
However, some of you said you've been here before, 2 or 3 folks, a couple of times. One of the big discussions that we've had ongoing is the future of AI and what's going to happen, what's still going to be left human. Where is it going to be human managing AI, or where's it going to be AI completely? And so who should be worrying about their jobs? And are the people, only a few people over here going to be okay because of nuance or ideation or whatever it is? Talk to us a little bit about job concerns.
Yeah. I think that there's an idea that you hit a button with AI and a Coke ad pops out, which is fairly, for any of you who've played with any of the open source video models or any of the Lula's runways, even VO3, which came out yesterday publicly, it's really not the case. Even if you're using just a video model and going straight text to prompt or text to video, it's kind of all over the place, right? Like sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you get something wildly different. And so ultimately, the team structure changed drastically. Our parent company, Prairie has worked on Coke in the past about 15 years ago. And their team at the time was something like 25 people. The team that created these ads, including the Coke team, was 2 people from Coke, and then 4 people as a core team from the Silverside, which is 2 creatives, a creative technologist, and a producer/end. So it does change the team structure drastically, and it allows you to create these ads, iterate on these things incredibly fast, and create essentially infinite versions, especially once you establish the workflows. But ultimately, it still requires the creativity. AI is inherently a derivative technology. Mm-hmm. And so it can create tons and tons of baseline ideas, tons of different concepts, things like that. But human taste has never been more important, because it's really determining what's going to resonate, what aligns with your brand. You can train models till the cows come home, but to some extent, you need humans to do that. The second is there's a lot of incredible music apps out there, a lot of incredible music models. They're not really at a point where you can use them at a commercial level in that context, defining the beats and all of that. So when you look at the music, all humans, there's no AI component there at all, which is really interesting. And then the third thing is just the fact that what Coke did is instead of saying, okay, great, I have 20% of the budget that I previously had for this, I'm going to lay a bunch of people off because I can do what I previously did by my, with this small segment of the budget. They diversified their projects significantly. So it goes back to this idea of talking to more customer segments. They said, we're not just going to do the holidays are coming campaign. We're going to do 5 other campaigns on a massive scale that are going to carry us way further than just the one. And so you have all of these much more streamlined teams doing significantly more for the same or less than they used to. All that to say, jobs are certainly, like a lot of the jobs that we know and love today are certainly going away without sugarcoating it. But a lot of jobs are coming into existence that we didn't previously know about.
And for those of you who didn't catch on to one of the things Johnny talked about, it's smart brands that look at cost savings and then instead of just pocketing them, they reinvest them, and that fuels their growth, right? And what actually you can never in a difficult environment economically, you can't cut your way out of a problem. You need to grow your way out. You need to grow the top line. So smart companies like Coke, working with folks like Siara and Johnny, they're able to, instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to save the rest of the 80%, they're able to produce so much more. And then that's probably going to increase their market share and, allow them to reach many, many more people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also just add quickly, I think one of the most interesting things about these technologies is, historically the agency model has been the gold standard of what it takes to create advertising like that. And I think there's been a fundamental shift away from that, one where you're not seeing any more agency of records, like the AOR models really shrinking drastically. And rightly so. I think it's a really inefficient model.
Yeah, we competed a lot against those. It's very bloated.
100%. There's massive bloat and there's massive overspending. You're still getting hit with overages. It takes longer.
Right.
But one of the really interesting things about that is that as you train these models, as they understand your brand guidelines, the colors, the messaging.
Oh yeah, tell them about the blue.
Well, it's really interesting is Coke in particular is very sensitive about any type of blue to the extent where we have, it's crazy. He has 8 projects that are in the works for them right now, one of which is coming out during the World Cup, so keep an eye out for that. And the sky quite literally could not be certain shades of blue, and they wanted warmer colors because they hate Pepsi. So they're very specific about that.
It's really interesting because I always, a lot of our clients have huge brand Bibles, and generally their colors are because of something about their own logo. Right. And they want you to use it. You can't use it over black or whatever. But that's the first time I've heard of the restrictions about that because of competition.
They are profoundly serious about it. Their CMO has been very explicit with us. But the cool thing is really this idea of ultimately allowing brands to own their marketing in a way that doesn't require all of the costs of the historic process. And so as you train these models on specific brand assets like the Coca-Cola bottle and logo, brand colors, and those watchouts like, hey, it can't be this hex code blue anywhere because that's a Pepsi blue, you can actually create systems that are completely bespoke to their teams that they can then own, run, and operate on their own in-house. And so it creates even further efficiencies, which is a big part of our goal, is we don't really want to be sitting there as your agency and making these ads for you forever. We want to create systems that are built around your unique use cases, not having back into off-the-shelf solutions that oftentimes don't work. We want to allow you to own your content generation at scale. Optimize real-time A/B/Z test and continually pump out content in the way that the modern society and the economy requires.
Cool.
Right, so I just wanted to double up on that. So, and Johnny, I think one of the points that I just want to reiterate is that we just have such a tendency to focus on the conversion rate and the this, the that, and we don't
Everybody knows
realize
what conversion rate is, right? Just check.
how many people order, basically. And we don't realize that with this strategic direction that you have either for business, positioning, market insight, market expansion, or creative direction and creative production, the waterfall effect it has. Now, talk to us a little bit about the views and how many people sort of saw this commercial and sort of the results of that.
I will. This is my little plug. That is the most viewed piece of AI in human history. So it's, that was within within a week that had 7 billion views. Now, obviously, some of those are probably crossovers and things like that. As of now,
Oh, it must be because
has to be
population.
right? So, but it was 7 billion organic views. And again, their third highest performing holiday ad ever. And so the Coca-Cola CMO or CEO actually talked about it at Davos as a direct correlation to a 12% bump in sales because of that.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Siara, when you talked about the whole idea of market expansion, is that sort of along the lines of, okay, we have tremendous savings, and so we can take that and reinvest it to get into a different market? Are we talking geographic? Are we talking other kinds of demographics? What kind of new market possibilities does that give?
New demographics, new users, new customer bases, as well as new cities. So one of the customers we have in beta is using our strategic planning output to really understand where do they need to go next. And what happens in marketing is that most often teams will go back to do focus group studies, or they'll go and do surveys and brand studies that last for months. Morpheus is able to really tap into voice of the customer data and changing customer trends. So you can actually pivot at the moment, and you can expand it to the city the very next day based on those changing trends. You don't have to wait for 3 months later. And this is where it pairs up so nicely with the creative, because if we're seeing trends changing demographically, we need somebody to come in and redo the ads very quickly, get into market very quickly, and be able to capitalize on that. That would never be possible in a traditional non-AI model.
So there's actually two huge areas of saving. One is knowing what to do, where to go, what do people care about, and then that forms into your strategy, which then you hand to Johnny, and
Exactly.
it allows him to execute on a variety of options that you have determined from over here with your AI work. That okay, try this, and this, and in that priority order, and here's where you spend to promote that, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say the cool thing about that is she doesn't actually even need to hand it to us. She can just hand it to our system.
Yeah.
And we can
It's a direct
generate
connection.
that content.
Really, your systems talk to each other.
And so you can kind of automatically generate that content, put it in market, understand how that content is performing in real time.
Wow.
And so you're seeing those trends of if a white logo is performing better than a red logo in Southern Louisiana, it'll flag that, allow you to generate that content basically instantly, and then redeploy it in the market. So you're squeezing the most possible ROI out of every single asset.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
And let's say some of the themes out of the voice of the customer data come up with around fit or durability. Those themes can directly be translated into a creative brief that's sent, and then the creative is created for that.
So, voice of the customer, you use that term. I know what it means, but how do you get it? Like, if your system is built, where are you getting the data to train them on what the voice of the customer is? For instance, let's say, I don't know, I love my Hokas, these running shoes, right? Relatively recent brand to the marketplace, pretty dominant. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're taking advantage of AI somewhere. But can you talk a little bit about the actual how, as far as this voice of the customer representation? Do you still have to go through doing market research or interviewing people? Where's it come from?
Well, think about your own experience, right? When you buy something, you're really happy about it, or when you're about to buy Hokas, you want to look for running shoes. You'll go to Reddit, you'll go to Quora, you'll start looking around at Amazon reviews, like what are the top running shoes that you want to buy? That's where all of the customer sentiment lies. The very honest customer sentiment. So
Because it's off their behavior.
exactly.
Everyone understands the deal when you ask people, what will you do? And the difference between what they say they will do and then later on what they go do, huge. Okay, so it sounds like this solves some of that because you're basing it off of data of actual behavior.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we marry that up with sales data. We look at the sentiment feedback. We're able to understand themes that are positive, negative, or neutral. We create NPS scores off of that house, a brand does. NPS scores is basically like net promoter score, is how willing is the customer to promote your brand to somebody else.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if we know that, and we know that score for your competitor, for anybody competing against Hoka, we can tell you, hey, you're not doing so well. There's more positive customer feedback for your competitor than there is for Hoka.
And that customer feedback is somewhere in a publicly available database?
Yes, yeah. So Reddit, Amazon reviews,
Okay.
Yelp, it's everywhere, right? We're all very open with our social media.
Right. Okay. So, because that's one of the things that I couldn't wrap my head around is how do you know what I think? Right.
If you don't say, we won't know.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of us or those of you who are, say, stingy with not wanting to put out reviews and things like that, you may not have your voice heard. Now, obviously, it's one person, billions.
We're all very worried about that.
Okay. So
I have a quick point to make on that.
Yeah.
I mean, not until fairly recently, maybe a couple of years ago, all this data was still there, but we didn't have the means to mine it to get the sentimental analysis or actionable stuff, right? Yeah. If somebody's saying, hey, this, Coke Zero doesn't taste like the way it was a few years ago, or whatever, right? That kind of feedback is extremely valuable. And now you can mine it, and AI can do a great job of taking the voluminous amount of data that's out there in the public forum, to crystallize it and then bring up the real good stuff that you can act on.
So that's another example.
This is conversational intelligence, a broader subject.
Right. So that's another example then of when we talked earlier about you could do things with AI that were at least improbable, if not impossible before in terms of turnaround times, et cetera. You can also get answers to things that existed out there, but you could never pull them together, as you're pointing out. So it enables you to be more and better informed, even as you're going down to then decide your strategy.
Absolutely. I call it the art of the possible, really on the creative side and the strategy side. It really is. We are at such an exciting time in the world where really anything you can think of can actually become a possibility.
It's pretty amazing to me. I'm new to AI. Okay, you could probably tell by some of the basic questions. My background is in marketing and production, but we, as I mentioned up top, we focus in the environmental space. And I just happened to come to a Founders Creative session, several months ago. It was on the intersection of AI and climate. So that kind of tweaked my interest. I had no idea that the proliferation of AI in the B2B space and in every place underlying everything, I thought of AI as, this is Chat GPT. Is this any good? And then you get Claude. I mean, that's such a tiny, minuscule piece of how it's impacting us as a society and as businesses. And I mean, the stuff that you guys are doing, to me, it's so cool because I knew what it was like to have to do it the old way. Okay. So, all right, enough of my questions. Hopefully I've stimulated or they have stimulated some thoughts or questions or challenges. We're not against a little bit of, competitive or what do they say, responsible opposing views for those of you old enough to remember the news back when it was the news. So questions, anything? Yes.
So there was human beings are noticeably missing from the ad. Is that by design or is that some kind of limitation?
Oh, what a great opening she said this.
It's a great question. It's very much by design. So ultimately for that Coke ad, there were two groups that created an ad. Ourselves, Silverside, and then another group called Secret Level. Amazing production house using AI. At the time, our firm belief was that the technology was not ready to produce humans, and it wasn't. Like in retrospect, we were 100% right. And so I don't know how many of you actually saw that ad when it came out originally, but it was not without controversy. Like there was a serious controversy around, it was kind of all seen as one campaign. And the largest piece of that controversy was around the humans in the opposing advertisement. So it tested significantly lower than what ultimately ran on every major broadcast globally. We made that choice very, very thoughtfully because we knew that if we put something out before that technology was ready, it would have been disastrous, and it was. That said, here we are, 8 months later, 7 months later, and the technology very much is there. And so there are things that I would guess that you've seen now that had AI generated humans, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing with some of the largest beauty brands in the world are doing fully AI generated humans, or the alternative to that is using actual human models, training a AI model on them, and then replicating them. So it allows you to actually capture skin tones, body shapes, measurements, all of that stuff, but then showcase products. So very long-winded way of saying, yeah, it was super intentional, and thank God. Who doesn't?
I know one of the things I was going to comment on is classic. Put as many dogs and cats and other cute little animals as you can. That was, even if it was before AI, that was one of the models in kids and animals. Who was the next? Yes, Masood.
Johnny, you mentioned, rather, you alluded to what you guys had done back in November. Sure, as like the VHS.
Yeah.
Given that there's tremendous progress and things are changing, and then yesterday I just commented on LinkedIn saying that, hey, Google just dropped the view array flow, and some of the samples are just mind-boggling in terms of what you can do, right? And you talked about the music is all human-generated. Now you got this huge library of stuff that you can actually prompt. So how do you deal with such rapid advances and then yet cannot keep pace with it and get the next best thing into production?
Yeah, it's a good question. And
He doesn't sleep.
yeah, exactly. It's like every day you wake up and you realize that your whole model has changed, and it's not a huge exaggeration. But our model is really based on this idea of partnership. I think that one of the things when we were starting Silverside, we ran into really consistently is that within 5 miles of our office at Levi Plaza, every month there were approximately 100 new funded AI startups, which is like a nightmare.
Are those real numbers?
These are real numbers. And so it's kind of a nightmare for brands, especially when you're looking at this landscape and going, oh my God, like I don't know what's safe. I don't know what's effective. I don't know what's going to give me best in class results. And I don't know what's not going to get me sued. Most importantly with these things. And so how we started was really this idea of how do we bridge the gap between all of these best in class technologies and startups who are doing all of these things really effectively and brands, and then weaving it together into a cohesive ecosystem so that you don't need 35 different subscriptions for 35 different things that may or may not work for you.
So you do the vetting for them?
So we do all the vetting. We go out and we have partnerships, for example, with Google, Runway, Luma, Anthropic, OpenAI, all of these like smaller partnerships as well with CoFrame and all of these up and coming startups. And we do all of the legal due diligence to make sure that you're indemnified, that you have all your IP protections, that clients can come in. And transparently, that's how we do it is through a partnership model. We're always on the search. So I run our partnerships team. And it's profoundly cutthroat in a way because every single week there's a better technology than the last. So you may have been my favorite partner 2 weeks ago. Suddenly you're not. That said, as these technologies progress, our whole thing is creating additional efficiencies. So for music, for example, then it really wasn't an option. Now it is. You can train entire models on just the Coke library of owned music and create brand new tracks that producers can then go in and tweak for all of the different SFX and music needs that you need for all those spots. It's my really long way of saying like I read a lot and I do a lot of outreach on LinkedIn to keep up with.
As you go out to get new big brands,
Sure.
part of your value prop then is the fact that you curate and you vet, and you probably have your own like virtual productions, if you will, with access to all these tools. Is that with the way are you leading now with you have access and you vetting these tools, or are you still leading with your creative genius, or like how you balance I with the expertise on these tools. It's how do the people, what do they want to buy from you? What are they buying first?
It's kind of like a walk or a crawl, walk, run approach. So it starts, our in is always, listen, we're going to give you access to this massive ecosystem of partners, and we can kind of understand your use cases and build around that. So one is just access to the partnerships and not having to go through a procurement process for every single one.
Right? That right there's a win for your clients, right?
Well, it's everybody. Procurement is the death of everything.
Procurement is, I mean, for Coca-Cola, it took me 4 months sitting with their procurement team every single day for half of my day trying to push these things through. It was like truly one of the most horrific experiences of my life. That in and of itself is a massive value add. I think the layer that people are buying from us is partially the creative genius, if you will, because that's kind of the crawl piece that we're implementing for them, especially when they're still learning the technologies. If you handed this off to them to run on their own, it would be like handing someone who's never seen a computer Adobe Photoshop and saying, go, you know? And so the second piece that we sell is building out these workflows and UXs that plug the APIs of all of these different partners in where needed, so that ultimately we can teach them a tool and they can go own it in a kind of a SaaS sense. Right. So their team doesn't have to pay us forevermore to be the implementer of these massive campaigns. Of course, we're always happy to do it because it means more money in our pocket, but transparently, we'd like to hand it off to them. Yeah. So those are really, it's the access, it's the creative genius and the initial implementation, but then ultimately it's workflows that are built around you, so you're not backing into off-the-shelf tools that may or may not work for you.
Yeah,
So in fact, you're helping teach. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I'm starting to think of like future, like what's the future?
Sure.
And what you just described is like the now scenario, but I was talking to someone at Google yesterday who's in marketing, and like they have like a magic studio production thing where they've curated, right? So look, do you see this as big companies are going to create their own production studios with that and stuff, but then there's probably going to be a certain demographic of customers that would be more interested in you.
No, I mean, yeah, 100%. Like there are many people gunning for what we're doing right now. It was very funny because one of my co-founders is on the board of the One Show, which is a big advertising board thing. And on that board also is WPP, which created Studio X, who is a direct competitor to us. And he didn't realize that my co-founder was in the room, and a fun little recording with he shared out later. Basically going, F those guys. Like we hate Silverside, so which is a fun moment for us.
Yeah.
That said, like, yeah, absolutely. People are gunning for it. What we've found is the speed of execution for these massive holding co's and large scale tech companies is significantly slower because there's a lot more bureaucracy that they have to go through. There's a lot more decision making. There's a lot more vetting. And so we're able to move and implement a lot faster, which is why Coke in their part actually moved away from the Studio X WPP team because they couldn't move fast enough with the evolving technology, and is now 12x down on their commitment through 12 additional fairly large scale projects.
So S them.
All right, next question.
So I had a follow-up question, and it's for both people on the panel. Where is the future of AI, just based on where things were several months ago to now? That hard to predict 18 months from now, but I want to get for both.
18 months, you said?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
That's too far out.
You need a crystal ball.
Yeah,
Very much so.
More than a crystal ball.
I have 3 months. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
Crack it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, everything is changing every day. And I think one of the things we've noticed in marketing is that there is tremendous pressure to adopt AI into all of the workflows, but there's no budget. Nobody is giving them the budget to do this, and they're having to experiment with existing budget that drives demand. So there's really that sort of friction between those two sort of, pulling points. I think it's actually going to be slower in adoption than we think, where we were, there's data centers being built that are now stopping, right? So I think the world is realizing it is going to be disruptive, but is slower than we think in terms of adoption. which I'll tell you gives all of us a lot of time to go and upskill ourselves, because there will be a time where they will continue to hire marketers. They will always continue to hire marketers, but they will want to have marketers or production specialists or advertising specialists who know AI versus those that don't. So there will be a very defining line. And so what's happening now is we bought ourselves a lot more time to spend upskilling our skills and get to learn how to operate in this new AI world.
And before we go to Johnny, I want a quick clarification on that. So the reason that is happening is because they're not, the folks from on high are saying, okay, we want you to go start using this AI stuff, as if you automatically already are experts and know which one to use, and they don't give them any money to do that, so they have to steal from other budgets.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I see quite the opposite. I mean, I think people are dedicated into building and scaling AI, and it's a quick and rapid industry. I mean, there are 100 million or so users on ChatGPT, right? It's Claude and Gemini and all the different things. But I do agree that early adoption is going to take a while, and then there are going to be some experts that are going to be just hyper programmed into offering solutions.
Yeah.
And then, it might take a while, I think, from the scale of graphics and capability of trading.
Yeah.
How do we maintain ethical AI in advertising, while using kind of the creative content from all the other creators out there?
What do you tell me a little bit more about when you say, how do we maintain ethical AI? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I think the Wide Wide Web is open for anybody to use, right? You could go to the book or Amazon and buy a library, but it's all intellectual content.
Yeah.
Right. And it's being mimicked and it's been duplicated. And so there are special talented people. I mean, bringing a director out is going to cost a lot of money. Like using producers costs a lot of hardcore money. But when that's cheapened into just $20 or $250 or several $1,000s for a team of people to use, you kind of lose the staffing ability to say, hey, let me buy that influencer the true dollar value of worth. Sure. Right. So is there going to be a point in time where that is reconciled into a fair ethical system?
Good question. I think that there's a few pieces there that I'll tackle kind of one by one, which is one, just the thought of stealing content offline and kind of what we now know OpenAI did, which is essentially scrape the web, steal everyone's data, treat them as their system, and sell it back to us.
Right.
Super fun and exciting, but they did it, and that's kind of where it is. So to some extent, I think for some of these large-scale tools, the train has left the station a little bit on that kind of stuff, and we've widely societally accepted it. I think that there's the onus kind of needs to now be on the actual implementers of this AI. And so a lot of what we do is curation of data sets and training our own models based on the bedrock of a ChatGPT or an Anthropic. So to some extent, none of us are 100% clean, very transparently. That being said, they offer massive indemnifications. So from a business standpoint, it works. From an ethical standpoint, I don't know if we can 100% say we're clean. A lot of the onus is now making sure that everything that we use is licensed, indemnifiable, and we're using data sets that have full transparency with clients so that they feel comfortable as well. Our goal, especially in the creative industry, is never to steal from creatives. It's kind of, biting the hand that feeds you, so to speak. And so there's that piece, which I think is a really weird, complex web. And to some extent, there will always be a gray area. We're doing a lot of stuff with actual human models now. For example, some of the work we did with Levi's is trying to create alternative stream of revenue for human models who do photo shoots, where you can train data sets on that person. Brands can buy it every time they create, generate, and traffic an image. That model then gets paid a royalty. So there's things like that ultimately allow creatives additional freedoms that they didn't have, so that they can make money from the Levi's shoot they did a year ago while going and doing a PacSun shoot. So there's that piece as well. And then the third piece, I don't know if I'm 100% understanding this piece of your question, so hopefully I'm answering it correctly, is, directors have spent their life curating this skill, and is there coming a point where these tools can basically replace them for $20? And I think that what we've seen again is this misconception that anyone can jump on Luma or Runway and spend 20 minutes and come out with something on par with what these big brands are putting out. And the reality is it's just couldn't be further from the truth. I've spent the last 2 years playing with these tools, and frankly, I still suck at them. Like, and very transparently, our teams are these incredible creatives who have spent the time to learn the tools, build out workflows that are incredibly specific and have all of these different nodes that build like Legos so that you can actually define the outputs, to the point where Luma came to us 2 weeks ago now and said, how the hell are you guys getting the outputs that you're getting? Our teams made these tools and they can't figure it out. And a lot of that is, which is crazy, right? And they're asking about pricing models and things like that, which is super fun. But it's these people who are now, it's just a new skill set. And these creatives are, instead of being a directorial editor, they're coming in, they're building workflows, they're defining their outputs to the nth degree. And then they have the editorial things, which may or may not be easier, but still require that taste.
Yeah, sorry, whatever. Well, but I think that's important. But I think we all learn those skill sets, and we all use those skill sets. To last point, I do think that things are going to scale. There's at some point, but it's going to take time. I do like the idea that some people who do the modeling thing on the Levi side of things are going to get some residual royalties. Yeah. I think at some point there's got to be some type of union to allow the directors or writers, casting agencies, maybe something run through Senate to allow for that ecosystem of royalties to happen versus an indemnification.
Yeah.
And then, kudos to both of you guys in regards to, fine tuning a process of just learning and programming and prompt engineering. In the bay, they call like vibe coding or something like that. You constantly tweaking and changing until the model is right. Either you scale it to a product that is fine-tuning LMLs or Raga, or the result seems like it was an actual set of 3D animators that put it together. All right, so that's a journey to tell.
Hey, when we opened and I was sharing the demographics in the room, I don't think I shared his background, which I just learned about. You want to share what you're doing? Like, if you provided context, you're like building stuff.
Yeah, I do security apps and secure apps. I do, that's what I do. And then I just kind of started dabbling into the graphics space. My brother was a 3D animator at the Pixar, and so
So that's where
He may know some of the guys that we work with now, because we have a bunch of former Pixar 3D animators who have kind of come over.
That's dope.
That's sick. Very cool.
Yeah.
So we have one over here. I just wanted another one. I make one quick comment. One of the things that made me realize is if you have people that are able to leverage Luma's tool in a way, or their set of tools in a way that even the folks at Luma aren't yet able to do, what it makes me think is that there's a sense of a level of self-awareness, or almost like meta thinking, where these people that you have who are able to produce these outputs must have a better ability to understand why do I like this shot better? If I'm a director, what is it that I'm seeing in there, and able to extract from their own intuition and their own view, what are the parameters that are making that what I like?
There's no accounting for taste. It's taste.
Okay. Yes.
Actually, it's kind of along those lines. I wanted to understand in those 4 days, and at about 150 of these different, how detail oriented did you have to be when you're giving these options to the AI to come up with? Is it 150 different ones, or is it like, we've got this one, I want you to fine tune every different and use like a full prompt with all the different details and lighting and all that other stuff, and come up with this? How is that process?
Yeah, it wasn't a prompt. It was lots of prompts. So first we created a data set. And interestingly, individual buildings are copyrightable. So you can't use individual buildings like the Eiffel Tower at night. But during the day, it's okay. Which is actually true.
That's interesting.
Skylines themselves are not copyrightable, actually. So you can use skylines as a whole. So we created a data set that were the skylines of the markets from different angles of each of the markets that we needed to localize to. We, of course, had a very lengthy discussion with Coke's BA at that point. So that was about a full day of that. And then the business fairs to make sure that they were comfortable with it. And then we ultimately fed it into a workflow that would create it in the style that we wanted to, with the lighting, with the angles, with all of the different pieces that we need. So it wasn't a prompt so much as one prompt feeding into several nodes, all of which that had parameters that we were able to tweak. So when you look at the permutations that you can create, it's like hundreds of millions of possible permutations when you're looking at all the drop-down menus that are available to us to these nodes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Why there are no KPIs? What is the volume of sales, the growth rate, etc.? These are all publicly held companies. They need to file 10Q, 10K. Anyway, but I thought a visual presentation will be much better.
When you're talking about KPIs specifically?
Yeah.
Well, I think for us, the KPI in this case, because it was their first, was, can you do it? Is this even possible? And that's why they came to us so last minute. When you're looking at the KPIs for the project we work on with Coke now, there's like very significant lifts in awareness, MPS scores, and then actual sales. Like when you look at how we work with all these brands, some of the biggest beauty brands in the world, Levi's, Coke, what have you, AI is beyond the point of just saying, great, let's see if it works. I wonder, isn't this fun? And now real decision makers are coming in and saying, okay, this could affect my bottom line. I want to see a clear jump from the time this campaign airs to the time it finishes. And it's not just in the creation process, but it's also what you had been talking about a little bit, which is this real-time optimization. Typically, historical media outputs were, okay, I'm going to put a bunch of media in market. I'm going to wait a month to get my data returned to me. I'm going to then feed that back to my creative teams who are going to say, okay, well, I guess we'll tweak it another month. And then 3 months later, I can put a new batch of content into the market. When you look at some of the things we talked about earlier, this ROI, it's literally taking months down to days and hours. Things could perform poorly for 3 days. I can take that down, redeploy media, and see 3 days later how that's performing. And I think that's where the KPIs are going, is how are every single piece of my campaign performing, and what's your average across all of it across my markets.
So you're defining new levels of success metrics, right? Where if you're the CFO and you say, okay, we're going to invest this much money, now you can say things like, okay, I want to know this lift in this city, awareness, unaided awareness with a prompt, and sales across all of those, and you can give them.
Well, and you can give KPIs to some extent before the campaign launches, which is kind of crazy, where you can do essentially like what you talked about. We have massive data lakes of consumer data that you can segment. So I can say, I need to understand, if I'm a bank, I'm Fifth Third Bank or whatever it is, I need to understand how my campaign is going to perform against middle-aged mothers who live inside Chicago. And to some extent, one of the things that we're proving out now is I can do theoretical testing, like AI testing before this thing launches with a fully complete ad, understand how it's launching, and then actually put it into market and see what the difference is, where that delta is.
And then that in turn gets fed into next time, so you learn more.
So that delta gets smaller and smaller between those two things, to the point where now oftentimes you're testing things before they go to market, and then you're saying, great, I know they're going to perform well on market. I don't know if I answered your question.
You're testing those with live human panels, or are you looking at possibly cloning, mirroring the human that you want to test that with?
So the latter. So it's not live human panels. We have so much consumer data now that what you kind of mentioned earlier, both of you, is there's kind of a difference in what people say they're going to do versus how they actually respond as consumers.
Yeah.
And so historically, focus groups have been pretty inaccurate. There are people whose whole job it is to try and interpret and figure out what's actually.
I have those, and I know what the outcome needs to be. So I will manage a focus group, see how much I want, and then say that the answer.
Right, exactly.
I manipulate.
100%. And for those of us,
Julie, I can't believe you did that.
this is your area of expertise.
You did it, research.
Yes.
So who is doing the storytelling? Are you guys writing the script, or are you telling the AI to write the script?
We write the script. So we use a lot of AI. We use data and AI synthesis to give us trends to capitalize on and understand how we can write it best. But like we talked about, we're super lucky at Silverside, where one of my co-founders is a man named PJ Pereira, who's the first ad executive to ever win an Emmy against traditional television with advertisements. So we have creative powerhouses that I think we'd be foolish to turn our noses up at. And frankly, if any of you guys have written, a chapter of a book or whatever on ChatGPT, and then had a legitimate author go and write it,
Mm-hmm.
it's not quite there yet, right? Like it's not exactly what you want. So we try and leverage it all the way up to the script writing to make sure that we're implementing it as effectively as possible, utilizing data to implement these ideas, and then iterating on it using that data as well. But the actual storytelling is still at this moment rests.
You mentioned there's a SAP model that already exists and how that now.
Yeah. I really despise comparing ourselves in any way to this company, but to some extent we use kind of a Palantir model. When you look at a Palantir model, like the Palantir company, which is
So it's a very customized.
very customized. I think that we're in 2025, and I think the era of backing into off-the-shelf solutions that are SaaS models meant to apply to everyone is kind of over. We can spin up tools using porous technology that we're kind of bending to your use case really fast. And so it's really about sitting with clients, understanding their use cases, what is and isn't applicable to them, and creating bespoke solutions directly for them that they can own and run.
And this is where I think the marketing tech stack is hard dead.
No.
I think that it's just, whatever is possible, it's personalized to every company, every demographic within that company, every market, and just the opportunities are endless. So we're moving away from categories with companies that operate in certain parts of the funnel to ecosystems that are tailored and personalized. So one ecosystem for Levi's would never match the ecosystem for, let's say, any other apparel brand. Yep.
Both are lines, both similar use cases, both drastic different workflows.
It's interesting. I'm hearing something that sounds to me, and to tell me if this is what you're saying, that there's a huge value in your ability to sit down with your client and spend the time and your expertise and listening and your presence and asking the right questions and iterating on that so that you really understand them.
Yes.
And that becomes the voice that you need to adhere to, or the image that you need to work toward. So that upfront part, that there's a talent there as well.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we're not talking too much about it, but there's the upfront of just learning to understand what the other person or his company want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one knows a brand better than people who sit in that brand all day, every day. And so I think the presumption that we could come in, not ask them about what they need and build them a solution that's going to work is probably hubris of the highest order. And therefore, our whole thesis is you need to work with the people who sit there and understand the do's and don'ts of that brand and what they do and don't need.
And the better you are as a listener and as being present and being able to synthesize what they want, that differentiates you from the other company who might do the same thing, but maybe not as well, or maybe they're not as empathetic.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think it's absolutely true. Yeah.
Next question. Yes.
I'd like to build a little bit on the question or conversation from the gentleman, the Pixar adjacent courses. Sorry, I'm a sir. The ethics, really, every time I see a new technology, whether it's in medicine or tech or whatever, the same thing always comes to mind. How do we keep the technology from outpacing our sense of humanity? I mean, none other than our brand new Pope, or someone's brand new Pope. I said that this is the biggest thing facing humanity right now. And you guys are on the cutting edge already. You're thinking about kind of the foundational level. How do we take care of the creatives? How do we take care of the humans that are involved in this? But beyond this group here of the people that are the models and the writers and so on, we have the 7 billion people on Earth who every single one, no matter how near or far, is affected by what we're doing in this room today, right? So how do we be thoughtful about it? Are there ethicists? Are there philosophers that are coming on board or being thought about to be part of the staff? I'm not one. I'm not looking for work.
She's a great writer.
I have a good budget. Oh, you chat GPT and writing like just cringe, but that's on topic. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, as well as anyone in the room, if that's not violating the share. I'm really fascinated by this. How do we, because we're in the middle of it, we're helping to create it. And if we're here in this geography, in this group, how do we help use it for good? You're doing it already, but how do we expand that? That's my simple question for this Friday afternoon.
Super easy. I wrote you a phone.
Yeah, I mean, I can take some. So we get asked that question a lot because we're in marketing data. We're in all of that. We look at creative as well. And we are also asked about ethics, right? Ethical AI, what does that look like when we create strategic plans and it's focused on one demographic versus another, you know, and that really can be heavily influenced by ethics, right? I think it is mandatory for all of us to make sure we are always centering the human experience. And we must play our role within the organization that we work for or lead, or clubs that we're part of, or organizations or summits, to always continuously center the human experience, because the tech is very shiny, right? It's very easy to get distracted, to go around really deep and forget everything that's happened. Now, in digital marketing, the same thing happened. We progressed to behavioral marketing. We're able to understand likes and dislikes and things like that. It was only later that the privacy laws and GDPR really started to come up. We have actually a wonderful opportunity to center that conversation now at the beginning and infancy of AI as it becomes, as it's accelerated throughout organizations, to make sure that that is always being centered. And I think if we all just continuously speak up, we will make sure that laws and governance are, parallel pathing this adoption.
Do you see that happening? I'm just going to push a little.
Yeah, no,
Okay, because-
I don't actually. I don't. Yeah, very honestly, I don't. But I think it's because we are so much experimenting and understanding what's possible that we don't know where to govern and how to govern right now. And so I think once it becomes a little bit more stable, it's quite volatile right now, and adoption is very sort of, patchy. I think once it becomes more stable, we will start to create governance and laws based on use cases, because mostly laws are based on use cases. And you need those use cases to be very popular, very, sort of democratized, to be able to create a law against it. And we just don't know that.
Idea for a future salon could be getting folks from academia and from the industry and talking about ethicists and philosophers and how to go about this, because it sounds like, yet again, the technology is outpacing, and so we have to play catch up. And from what I'm hearing Siara say is that it'd be nice if, but in the reality of today, it might not be happening yet. Maybe there's reasons why, or maybe it's just because we don't do anything.
Speaking of staffing is tech heavy. Yeah, because you're just looking, we all do it. Whatever's right in front of us, whatever's most in need. You have 4 days. We want 150 persons. We want cups here. We want this. We want that. Go. The other feels like almost a nice to have, but if there's a way to integrate it in, it's to your point, Siara, about we're still figuring it out. It's a little bit of shiny objects.
Yeah.
But the sooner we can bring this, my arguing, or I suppose for it, the sooner we can bring those sorts of folks in to the conversation at the fundamental starting level, I think the better we are, because the longer we wait, the more we have to kind of backtrack into it. Yeah. I don't know how. I don't get it yet. You're all fighting with lowering budgets or things, and yet, I don't know.
I think that's a good idea. Like, having that framework, I mean, to your point earlier, and building that foundation. And I think I've seen other countries approach it differently. In my line of work in cybersecurity, we try to get ahead of it by defining policies that allow team users and people on the ground to know exactly what the parameters were, and to use it, successfully. In the creative space, things are a bit more open. There's a lot more nuance. I think there's a lot more acceptance for ethics, for rule of law, for supporting and setting up royalty processes for people who direct it and write things. I don't think OpenAI is any exception to it. I think we'll figure out a way how we work with Napster and the other 3 companies and setting up a royalty percentage. Maybe and allowing them to benefit from that. I think the global AI keywords model has been a success with that because they are royalty statements that even advertising companies as large as Google have to take care of. So I think, at some point the advertising agencies have to be a part of those discussions, maybe through the Senate. My whole thing is like pushing it back to the government to have that type of inclusive, collaborative partnership that would allow for proper compensation, for things. I mean, yeah, there could be stock image of claims. Yeah, things could be like written in-house and, pay staff or a flat fee, but I'm sure that there are people out there that have done some really creative, genius things and gone to school for it. They've had a lot of training involved. They've learned inside and outside of Hollywood. And, the last thing they want is like, whoa, that is my technique that someone else is using. Right. So I think that it has to be still democratized, still nuanced, but at the same time, compensated,
Well, in Founders Creative has taken this on in general. We're finally got barked, and I don't know where it was in the Innovators Forum, but we had two lawyers who are focused on ethics, who have their own private practices for ethics, and they work and they counsel corporations on how to handle it. And this could just be my takeaway at the time, but the time was that the counsel in general was, we all know what's right. Like, as humans, right? We know what we should be doing because the government hasn't really laid down all the parameters and laws. So the counsel back to us was, it's up to us to start the conversation while government catches up to kind of figure it out. Because the problem is we all have whiplash, right? Because every single day there's anything to consider, anything to look at, or a new problem that's arrived. But we do have, Joe, some Katerina focused on this. That's her business, and I don't think she has a counsel herself for ethics, but it would be a hot topic that's across all business functions, right? The edit marketing.
No, I think that's a good idea that there are attorneys involved in that.
Yeah.
That at some point he has to work.
They don't have final answers. They're very careful to not have a final answer. And they're very careful because, like, every single day, there's different people in government and the Senate or whatever having a perspective. But it's a scary thing to start to regulate.
See, by and large, it's been more of an afterthought than being, hey, this has to be correct by construction, right? Part of the DNA of a company. See, big companies like Google that have deep pockets are worried about liability, so they are forced to do it. However, the rest of the small and medium business, they don't have the time, money, and resources to put this as, hey, no, let's first take care of this before you start building products, right? It has to be part of the DNA. And I keep hearing, just like you have a human resources department, there's going to be an AI resources where it'll govern how AI agents work, in conjunction with humans. That's an interesting thing to look out for. It's not my idea. I heard this from
I noticed one more thing for the more technical people in the audience, because that conversation I was referring to is coming back in more detail. It was actually some kind of product forum, and they were counseling people who are building products not to wait for all the rules, but behave well. And so this is all a directive to people building stuff about, getting people's data, using people's data, that do a good job, but don't stop. Because you stop, you're not going to get your product out.
So it's interesting when you think about it, there's a question overlying that is, are we as humans and as subspecies subgroup within that, people are technologists, are we likely to honor what we believe to be the right thing to do versus a business growth opportunity? And it just comes down to a whole human decision of, do we by ourselves, without governance and rules and regulations, behave well toward other people? And
Interesting. It was an interesting, very real world example that we run into of what you talked about, which is, why don't people start with, in the DNA, we need to address the foundational IP concerns and all the security pieces. And one of our largest strategic investors is a company out of Germany. And Germany and Europe in general is much more concerned about security, privacy, IP infringement, all of that. And so they tried that. We built essentially in tandem a similar tool. And they built theirs with total compliance. And by the time it came to market, it was about a year behind where everything else was. It was so far behind, it was completely unsellable. Right. So they were pretty baffled by the American model of build it, figure out the safety concerns later, like. Right, exactly.
So it's first to market, not compliance to market. It's very difficult to get to market. You got following those rules and stuff.
And yet, if you back it up a level, is that good? Right? I mean, completely not for today's discussion, but does that help us as a society evolve to a place where we want to be? Or is it like race to the bottom?
I do think if we take the lead as technology people, business people, etc., government will, well, this government, granted, I used to be a reporter for a tech magazine, and covering business, covering government, they're so far behind, and they don't know what they don't know. It's Dunning-Kruger, 100%. And so I really think, I mean, you've seen it in the news reporting. They don't know what's going on, even if they're well-meaning. But here in the Valley, you take the lead, you take the influence, you bring that, you spread that out to the populace. I think the government will follow, maybe after 3.5 years, but, people will follow. But I don't think waiting for that in any way, shape, or form, or even hoping to influence them. I think it just, generally don't exist. Do the right thing, make money, be happy.
Great.
There's the ideal world and there's the real world, and as much as I'd like the real world to be great, it is real, and everybody is fighting to get to market. If you're building a startup, trying to get there, so it's a bit challenging sometimes to do everything. But that being said, I had a very specific questions on the technical side, doing the build out, and it's more on the implementation of brand and the emotion that you're trying to trigger when you're utilizing an AI like this, versus if you're trying to, connect it to behavior. Right? Is there something? I'm not a marketing I'm founder of the company, so I know a little bit of a lot of difference between more than anything else. But and so I was just wondering what that if there's a process for that, and how much AI is kind of involved with that level.
Can you restate the question, because I'm not following?
So if we're attaching an emotion, to brand, right? That's something we've been doing for a long time. That's very much integrated. Yeah. But if we're looking at connecting to behavior, that also might be something we've been doing for a long time. I'm wondering, and how much AI would influence that part of it when you're building the models like this. How much are you connecting there, and how's it analyzing?
When you start with marketing strategy, right, you come up with what you want your brand personality to be, right? And then the behaviors and emotions you want to invoke in the people that buy your brand, right? So all of that is still very much thought leadership. Now, with all of the AI models, if I'm understanding your question correctly, with all of the AI models, you still need that creative teaching person, the person that really knows marketing, that really knows how marketing thought and strategy come to life in commercials, how the presence of dogs and cats invokes certain emotions and things like that. That translating function, I don't think is in AI. I think it's still centered with us as humans on how to understand and translate that into imagery. And that's where I think it still stays. Trying to ask AI to do that in a prompt, I think you're still going to get really bad outputs. So I think that's where, we really center ourselves in this whole AI equation and continue to prop up the folks that have that expertise.
Before you go on, I want to just clarify if we're addressing your question, because I heard it as a little bit what you said and a little more. Are you asking about the fact that we already are trying to elicit emotions, that's part of what's there, and we've done it historically? Are you asking how to connect the behavior with the emotions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, how we connect the behavior to the emotions, where the marketing, the way that we're implementing marketing, we can streamline that towards doing something. For example, going to pick up gas, so you're not really thinking about it, but now you kind of triggered this emotion now through this advertising from Shell, and now all of a sudden you feel the urgency to pick up, and you have an EV.
Okay, so does that resonate at all? The connection between seeking to drive an emotion and seeking to generate emotion, seeking to drive behavior?
I mean, that's like, that is in a nutshell what advertising is. Like, emotions drive behavior. There's a 1-to-1 correlation. And when you're angry, you cash out. When you love, you go and buy flowers, whatever. So yeah, I mean, there's a huge push in order to try and connect to the emotion and the ability to give emotion to advertising spots with these foundational technologies. As Siara said right now, some of them are really good with multimodal reasoning and doing this kind of, you read a text and now I'm sad, and it goes through the transition. We're getting a lot better, like around humans. But a lot of it now, in terms of just sheer implementation, is video to video. Like, it'll be me emoting, and then will reskin me into a claymation character emoting, and it gives you that emotion, right? And so it just, in sheer implementation, there's that. And then in the larger scheme of things, it's really easy to tie the two together because they're inextricably linked. And so when you're thinking about advertising, we're always trying to drive emotion. And we know by driving emotion, it will ultimately drive action. The inverse is not always true.
So wait, though. What if we already have this massive multiple millions of data sets,
right?
And they're all centered around actual behavior. Last comment, and then we can talk offline afterwards. I guess we're a little over, which is good. But the thing that makes me think when he's asking the question and how you guys are talking about it, traditionally I was always brought up that way. Go for creating an emotion and it leads to behavior. Sure, but I could see the possibility of, you have all of this behavioral data and you know how to generate, what people behave like based on A, B, C, D, and E. Yeah. You have to care as much about the emotion, or are you going to get it automatically by playing toward the behavior?
You don't. I mean, you don't really have to care as much about the emotion, which is true. That being said, like, the technology is changing really rapidly. Humans fundamentally are not changing. Mm-hmm. So I think the correlation and causation can be debated, but the link is inextricable.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do think, to your point, absolutely. Like, I think you could care less about emotive reasoning because a lot of it's now like, there's like SEO, and now you have LLMO, and that though your agents are going to go find the thing for you, so it's more needs based.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. We are overtime. First of all, please, round of applause for our amazing people. And we just want to say from the heart, thank you, because without you guys coming out and being here and asking questions and pushing the thoughts, there is no Founders Creative, right? We rely on people showing up, offering their insights, challenging our questions and assumptions, and providing your own unique inspiration and expertise. So especially on a Friday afternoon, Memorial Day weekend. So thank you. And please stay tuned. We will be, after our brief break for the summer, you'll be seeing a lot more coming. Yeah, that's it. I thank you.